Everyone, as I just said, I'm Caitlin Burns, and I'm what's called a transmedia producer. I work with a firm out of New York City called Starlight Runner Entertainment, and I work with Hollywood studios and game publishing houses and NGOs and cities and nonprofit organizations, and I tell stories. Today I'll be talking to you a little bit about how I do it and how you can too. All right. Story. Story is a powerful motivator. It can produce a vivid simulation of reality, and they give the audience the opportunity to enter fully into the thoughts and feelings of others. This is a very smart crowd, but for people who are not necessarily academic, stories let us play test reality. They allow us to experiment with very complicated ideas without exposing ourselves to genuine peril. They then become the cultural touchstones to discuss our shared experience over time, and they take us places. They let us go to places that we would never be able to go on our own, at limited to no cost. They give us the tools to learn and can affect millions of people's lives in positive ways. They not only explain ideas, but they inspire action as well. They help us to face and overcome our fears. They're the reason that we've survived. They're how we spoke to one another and learned from one another in antiquity and became the dominant species on the planet. It's a little dramatic. But what does that mean? What does that mean to us now? I'm telling you a little bit about myself. I told you about the plane trip I took this morning. And I'm going to tell you about a danger. This is from one of the top 20 most popular TED Talks, and it happened to be the first TED Talk I ever viewed. This woman, Chimamanda Adichie, is an author from Nigeria, and I recommend you watch the entire thing when you have 15 minutes. But she talks largely about what it was like for her growing up in Nigeria and experiencing the stories of Britain. She grew up with storybooks and reading and writing primers that were in English, but were from Britain. So she was filled with dreams of meadows and bunnies and excitement about the sun coming up and ginger beer, even though it had very little to do with the life that she saw around her every day. When she started to write, she read stories that were very much like the ones she had been reading because they were the models she'd been given. When you show people the same thing over and over again, they become that thing. They internalize it. They internalize the way they see people act, and they imagine the potential that you show to them. So, how do we support people to share their stories and provide unique insights when they've grown up inundated with single stories? For the past almost century, stories have been very centralized. It's been an opportunity for people who to share stories in global, incredibly far-reaching ways, but they've also been very tidy. They've been discreet, they've been neat plots, neat time slots, and delivered to a fairly captive audience in a theater or a television set. We all know this has changed. The digital revolution has happened. Everyone in this room is carrying at least 2 vectors to see a story. If you add the human body, it's maybe a bajillion vectors. A number so large that we can't even conceive of it because it's approaching infinity. And so a renaissance has emerged in the ways we can speak to one another, in the ways we can tell stories and communicate ideas. There have never been as many ways, as many opportunities to reach someone or to create something artistically or to tell a story. So with all of that opportunity, how do we develop something that's substantial, that's lasting, that gets our point across and reaches a lot of people without being that single dangerous viewpoint? Well, Transmedia storytelling is a concept that was initially posited by the gentleman Henry Jenkins at the MIT Media Lab, now at USC Annenberg, and adopted about 10 years ago by the company I work for. We were founded in 2000. We had a hyphen in it before that. And the concept is that elements of a story will be systematically told across multiple delivery channels for the creation of a larger, coordinated experience. In other words, if you have a film or a game or a book, it should be the best possible film or game or book communicating that story as well as you can possibly do it. But the same way you can have a violin play an amazing solo, or flutes play a solo or a duet or a trio, you can combine those to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts. I've worked on more than a dozen major global campaigns and major storytelling developments. You've seen a couple. Pirates of the Caribbean was the first one I worked on. We were with them for 6 years. Halo for Microsoft, the first-person shooter. Disney Fairies, exploring the character of Tinkerbell and her friends. And Tron Legacy, which has an amazing rollout that includes not just the feature film, but an animated series, a variety of comic books, and games that all weave a different story together along the same chronology. So, how does this help us? These techniques allow us to examine the core themes and ideas of a story that we're positing from different perspectives. It gives us different mirrors on the journey that, as an artist, we would want to instill in our audiences. But that doesn't happen on its own. No story spreads by itself. It takes a lot of work and a good bit of gumption to get a story, an idea, a concept, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, out to people who find it inspiring, find it engaging, and want to take it out and buy it, or play it, or watch it. Your story must reach out to others. I think everyone has seen a really incredible scientific discovery, and maybe have had the chance to read the paper, but aren't able to see why other people don't learn about it, or have been working in a field and suddenly see after 3 years of work that someone has been working across the globe, but you had never had the opportunity to meet one another. Well, this sort of interconnection is the same thing that we find with humans and fans. It's what we do in the entertainment industry, it's what we do when we're talking about philanthropy, it's what we do when we're talking about bringing people together in cities. And there are some best practices that I want to share with you guys, the secret sauce to making this work. So, you can tweet about it to hell with it. The first is that you actually have to be interesting. There needs to be something substantial that you're saying that's worth the time and energy that not just you're putting into it, but you're asking other people to put into it. Then you need to be able to describe it in a way that provokes the imagination. That it's not just interesting for its own sake, but it appeals to something genuinely aspirational. A dream or an imagining that's much larger than this moment, this discovery, this story, this person. Then you need to start giving people something to talk about. And these might be the events of your film, the events of a game, the different releases of information about the development of research. And you need to be able to continue that conversation. You need to be able to find ways to keep it going. Successful transmedia is defined and signified by two-way communications. The conversation between the audience and the story is essential. Not everywhere. It's a little optimistic to imagine that while you're watching a movie, you'll be able to agree with everyone in the audience about how to change it. But there are different ways to tell a story that are much better suited to it. But the important thing is that you are finding ways to foster discussion, to get people thinking and imagining how they fit and react to the world that you're creating for them. That discussion has the potential to come up with ideas you never imagined before. There are examples from the entertainment industry about this, where writers in writers' rooms for television shows like Lost saw something really fascinating in what they observed in the forums discussing the show, and adjusted their paths accordingly. The same is true in the way we communicate about infrastructure in cities. We learn from discussion, and those insights are the most valuable thing you can have in a long-term, long-form story campaign. Those connections also yield real moments of understanding where you feel like you're a part of the world, like it sees you and you see it back. You take it seriously, and the story takes you seriously as well. Stories ask the big questions, but it's up to us to answer them. None of the stories that we all know are ones with ends, the ones that are asking big questions about life, mortality, the meaning of all of existence. Those are the ones that have lasted the test of time and still have us asking questions today. So, if you want to teach, build, sell, aid, enlighten, or inspire, your success in the future is not determined by the story you can tell on one platform or the story that is going to come out of your head, but how you can create a story with people together. Thank you very much.
It's with some considerable trepidation that I invite Brad Allenby to come to the front of the room to talk about the future of engineering.